decisions with the possible exception of making direction to staff. If anybody needs a copy of our agenda, there is one back on the cart there. There are various items. We'll have public comment after or as part of each of those items. If you want to comment, you can wait to comment on until we get to that if you would like. But we also have an opportunity for public comment at the very beginning on any item in case you need to make your comment and then leave. We understand that completely. And at the very end, we'll have an opportunity for comment on also on anything that was not on our agenda tonight, or you can do that at the very beginning of our meeting. So with that, I'm going to open up for public comment unless there's anything our city administrator has in the way of preliminaries before I do so.
Mayor and Council, I do not have anything other than what's on the agenda.
Very good, thank you. So this is an opportunity for public comment on any item, either on our agenda or not. If anybody would like to comment, again, come forward, and if it's specific to our agenda, you'll have an opportunity to comment at that time also later. So again, public comment on any item on our agenda or not, this is your time to do that. Please come forward. Is there any public comment at this point? Okay, no one is coming forward. There's no one online, so we will close the public comment period. Also, just comment for council. We have two council members with us on Zoom, Council Member Aspenleiter and also Council Member Owen. If either of you would like to comment at any point, please use your little yellow hand, and we'll try to spot that. If we miss it, though, please feel free to just kind of interrupt and say you'd like to make comment. Other council members, if you see the little yellow hands go up and I don't see it, please feel free to point it out to me. So with that, we'll move on then to the first item on our agenda. And before we do that, Councilmember Neese.
I just want to make a note. I think it was, we changed our processes to register to be online. And there's no one, I believe, Kevin, there's no one who's registered, so there won't be any public comment online because no one's registered. But if anyone's listening to this later, they want to make sure they register if they want to get on for public comment through Zoom. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. You're always welcome in person. And if you want to appear by Zoom, just note the city's rules requiring advance registration by noon of the day of the meeting. Okay, with that, again, we'll move to our first item on our agenda, which is the Yellowstone County short-term jail request. This Board of County Commissioners, as most of us know, responded to our suggestion of creating a short-term holding facility. And Chris, I think you were going to lead off that discussion before it goes to the council.
Correct. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So recognizing how critical of an issue it is, I wanted to default to putting it on the agenda rather than not having it on the agenda. If it's not on the agenda, we couldn't have a discussion about it. I'll tell you the three things I'm looking for or things that we're working on. So specifically, so I guess just to back up for the public or anybody who may be watching. So in early November, I think it was November 7th, the city submitted a letter to the county commissioners asking that they consider opening some type of a short-term detention facility, temporary in nature, and as a test. I think with a couple of things in mind. A, as a test to see would it work, what would it impact would it have, and secondly, it might be a bridge to get us towards ultimately a permanent expansion of the jail and some long-term solutions. The county was responsive to that. We received that letter. I think it's dated January 30th. A lot of work went on between our letter and theirs relative to architect work and other things, and a lot of communication between the city and county, and a subcommittee of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee has been working on this issue. And so all that's happened. And then, so we received this letter last week, and how I'm approaching it, and part of what I wanted to get from you tonight is if I'm heading in the right direction. So first, it is that you email me, I think it would be helpful, email me the questions or thoughts. You have issues that you would like us to look into, answer, as we draft a response to the January 30 request. Secondly, that you email me if you're interested in sitting on, for lack of a better term, an ad hoc committee with city administration to draft this letter of response. Ultimately, that letter, I think, we're at a stage where it will need and should be approved by the full city council. But I think, frankly, it would be helpful working through all that information and drafting that letter, being so key between our policy body and theirs, that we have some help doing that. And then third was really just informational, which is I do have a scheduled meeting later this week internal that includes our municipal judges, it includes our police department, it includes our city attorney's office, administration and finance, all asking ourselves all those same questions. Where, in responding to their letter, what information do we need to know and understand as to how a system like this would work? So, wanted to give you guys an update, let you know that we shouldn't, I don't believe, take weeks to respond, but it's only been days so far. We're working on it on the operational side, administrative side, and ask, frankly, if your thoughts, suggestions, questions, if you email them to us and volunteer to sit on a group, we can work through that, I think, to give a more thoughtful response ultimately to the county. And that's all that I had, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Would you like us to give you our request for information now, or hold those, or a little combination of both, and ultimately be up to the council whether they want to take this time to do that? But
well, first I should say any email between you and I and you is public information. So it's not about it not being public. Anything we send to each other is public. But frankly, it would be more effective, I think, to have that in writing from you guys so that the group can collectively and the staff can make sure we're thoughtfully getting information back to you as you decide how to move forward. So preference would be, frankly, email, whatever conversation you want to have this evening, but I think the most effective way, frankly, would be to email those in.
okay, thank you, Chris. Just for the public, I think, who might be listening, I think some of the obvious questions that staff is going to have to wrestle with are how much money do we have? And what are the projections? So we have a better idea of what the trade-offs are going to be with other public safety commitments that we have made when it comes to our domestic violence, the Family Justice Center, crisis response units, SEPTED, all these very valuable public safety things. So how much money do we have? Second is, how much money does the county have? We know they've got some substantial reserves, but they also have some very valuable needs at Metra for those dollars, for example. And then how many beds can we really use? And that's really something that our chief of police, I think, is going to have to weigh in on in the department. What do they want? What would be useful? And other council members have other things, I'm sure, as well, but those are sort of the three major ones I know on top of my head that come to mind. Council, you've heard Chris's recommendation, how we proceed on this. Are you okay with that? Anything you want to add or subtract? Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, I guess if we do it this way, what time frame do you anticipate sending a letter back? As you said, we don't want to wait forever. I mean, I don't want to do it in 2 days, but I think what would be a reasonable amount of time for discussion and fact-finding before it comes back to the council?
Well, I think ultimately, if we have a council take action to sign off on the letter, if we choose to take it that formal of a approach, that would be on the 26th of February, which gives me a little bit of concern because it's 4 weeks out, but the packet material for next week is already out, and I don't see realistically how in the next 24 hours or 48 hours we'll get everything answered to be a part of Monday's conversation. So That would be if there were actual formal, a city vote. I suppose, just thinking off the top of my head, another approach could be if the questions are answered, the letter is drafted, and we want to push it out to all of you, and it's available to the public, maybe it's the kind of thing that you give the nod that it can be sent across to the county. It's not, I'm not envisioning that our letter is going to say in absolute terms, we'll give you this much cash on this time frame kind of a thing. So I think there would probably a way to do that to keep the conversation moving forward without locking yourselves into precisely what might this arrangement look like. But some combination, one of those two.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for Chris or for the council? Council Member Kennedy?
As I've done a little research on this, and one of the things that has me disturbed is it was supposed to be a temporary 72-hour, and it was a temporary structure, and it doesn't seem like it's there. But I just wanted to, in the Attorney General's opinions, volume number 37, opinion number 10, was done back in 1977, so you can look it up if you like. This is Greeley's opinion, and I'm going to the very last page, page 44, and it's number 2. A county may charge a city or a town for maintaining prisoners committed to the county jail at the request of a city or town police department in the course of enforcing city or town ordinances. Number 3 states, and this is the Attorney General's opinion, county may not charge a city or town for maintaining prisoners committed to the county jail at the request of a city or town police department in the course of enforcing state laws. And because of that, and looking at that, and going back through the on detention facility and who is maintaining, and looking at codes annotated 7-32-2201 in the MCA codes, you will see who runs a detention center, who puts the people in the detention center, and who pays for it. I think that's very important when you start to get into the process of we're going to pay and we're going to do something different than state law actually puts out there. So I think Chris's idea is very good, that we have some discussion and we talk about this before we get into some type of agreement that goes against what the state statutes are saying that we're contributing, because you have to remember one thing. The people in the city of Billings pay county taxes for that jail. So you're probably paying about 72% of the expenses on the jail. Are you going to come back and ask the taxpayers in the city of Billings to pay more? And that's kind of double dipping. So I would be a little careful of that. So I would take Chris up on his offer that we get questions to him. I've sent mine to him already, and we come back and have another discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Other, thank you. Councilmember Aspenlider.
Thanks, and I appreciate discussion. I'm on board with Chris's request to send these in so that a small group can try to work through them, come back with some points and some advice to council with respect to answering those questions and proposing a strategy in that process. I'm most certainly willing and would love to be a part of that ad hoc committee, whatever that makeup is. I'll send the email requesting that. I've texted that to Chris already as well. Just a couple thoughts on this. Like, first, I think we've got to be very careful about trying to insinuate what the county does have or does not have in their cash reserves, what they're spending their money on, what they're not spending their money on, and for that to be perceived as us continuing to throw rocks at their glass house like they've been throwing rocks at our glass house. I don't think that's helpful. I don't think that moves this conversation forward or sets the foundation for this conversation to be fruitful. I mean, what we're talking about here is, can we get across the line in partnering with that facility or not? What the county has or does not have is not our business. We have no authority over what they spend their money on. What they're asking us is very clear, and I think the conversation for us is very clear about, are we willing to do that or are we not? Or are we willing to do some portion of it or are we not? But I mean, we have a terrible working relationship with the county, and the only people that are paying the price for that are the citizens of our city and of our county. And that's not going to get better as we keep throwing rocks at each other, the county included in that conversation. So I just caution everybody to be very mindful of that part. Secondly, I think this is really a conversation about, is it something we're willing to participate in? Yes, it's changed from a temporary facility to a permanent facility. But I think the conversation can still be around, is this a benefit to public safety, to officer morale, and does it help equip our BPD with the tools they need to effectively police our community? The obligations are clear. You know, the county is responsible for the jail. But if this is something that we can try to build a bridge back to with the county to provide quick and immediate response to a public safety concern, which we are desperately in right now, I think that's the context of this conversation. So that's my thoughts. I'm happy to participate on any detailed level. I'll also be reaching out to the Attorney General based on Councilman Kennedy's findings to get his perspective on that. I think there's value in getting his take on whether the city can or cannot. If that's the insinuation that we can't participate financially, I'm certain that the Attorney General, knowing the situation in Billings, will respond quickly and swiftly to clarification on that. So if that's something that we feel we need, and it's going to be a part of this conversation, let's get it cleared up, and let's get it cleared up quickly. A 1971 AG's opinion is only as good as the AG that gave it. And so let's get clarification as to where we stand today.
Very good. Thank you very much. Council, I'm not hearing any disagreement with moving forward in this path. Anything else before we move on to the next item? Councilmember Shaw.
Just really quickly, I just indicated to Councilmember Neese that I think we should put this topic on the agenda for the now Local Affairs and Legislative Committee, which is meeting this Wednesday at 4 p.m. So if anyone, I think it falls right underneath the umbrella of local issues and legislative issues, and would be a good time to have that discussion. So if anybody wants to join us besides the 4 people on that committee, that would be great.
Okay, we can leave that up to that committee. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councilmember Kennedy brings up some good points there, and I'd like to make sure we look through all of this and get our city attorney involved in finding out, is this something legally we can or can't do? And then what kind of liability will the city have if we go ahead and start partnering with this, with those inmates? So I think this does open up a whole lot more than I think initially that we talked about, a temporary facility. I mean, we're in desperate need. I mean, the reason we're attacking this is, even though we sent the letter last November, this has been going on for years, and we have been working on some way to get it done, and to the point where now we tried to, okay, we're going to use our own city money, even though the county's responsible for the jail, we're going to do what it takes to try to protect our citizens. And we're trying to step up something and try this temporary facility. The county doesn't want to participate in the temporary facility. That's understandable. That's their choice. It's their jail. They run it. But I think if they want to move forward with a more permanent facility, and it's going to take another 2 years, that's that much longer that it's going to be before we can actually start seeing things happening. If the temporary facility would have been taken hold, or if they would have proceeded with that, we would start seeing, that facility used in just a couple of months from now, because this was started quite a while ago. And so I think where we're at now, I think we don't have a choice, but it's the county's call now. We're going to have to study this, get some questions, find out where we're at. and come back to it. So I think the more questions we have, I think we need to bring this back to another public work session. I think it's great to get ideas to the city administrator to formulate those, but I think we need, as council members, to be able to talk about it in public, to hear from other council members, so the public, and from public on what they think about this as well. So I think we need to make sure we publicize this well for the next time it comes to a work session, so we can hear from the public on this and what they want to hear as well. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Owen has her hands up. Councilmember Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have much voice, so I'm not going to say much. But I do think if we're going to, and I think we should have public input on this, but if we do, then we should make sure that the facts are straight. I've not heard 2 years as any kind of timeline. And in fact, I think one of our, certainly when I have worked on this, I have stressed, and I think we should all continue to full-throatedly express the need for speed and urgency. What I've heard is a timeline, something like 12 to 14 months, and I think we need to push very hard for speed. I also think it's important that we keep this facility in context. This facility is designed to address a very specific population that is not being addressed right now. And I think I see sitting next to Chris, Karen, not Gina, and I think Karen can tell you how many criminal cases they can't prosecute because defendants are on the run. And having the opportunity to get some of those misdemeanors in front of a judge very quickly before those crimes continue to be committed and continue to be escalated is a material benefit that makes an overall justice system work better. And when that overall justice system works better, then we are better able to build the larger jail. Because just like hiring more police doesn't help us until we have a place to put them, building a bigger jail doesn't help us until we have a criminal justice system that can efficiently move people through the system, because people aren't serving sentences except for BMC at YCDF. They are awaiting trial. So we have to look at this systemically. The short-term holding facility is a piece of a larger puzzle, but that larger puzzle is really critical. I think we have an opportunity here to have a serious discussion about how we do something now that points towards a very critically needed jail expansion. So I don't want us to lose the context. This facility is not a replacement for a jail expansion. It is for a targeted population, but that targeted population is bogging down the system that makes everything inefficient, and it isn't helping us. And so if we can improve these efficiencies, we have a better case for a jail expansion as a county, as a community. And I think it's really important that we keep that, that context of a systemic approach to criminal justice in mind.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Boyett, and then Council, I'd recommend we start moving toward item number 2.
I was wondering, do we need some kind of direction for the staff at this point? If so, I would
We've been
offer
told what the staff's plan is, and if we want to have a vote, we can do that, but my sense is there's a consensus, and unless we want to stand in the way of that or modify that, that's what's going to happen.
I just want to reiterate that if council has questions, they need to do it now. Don't wait 2 weeks to do this. It should be sooner than later, and the meeting from staff back to us should be sooner than later.
Very good. Understood. Good point. Okay, anything else, Council, before we do ask if there's public comment on this item and move after that to item number 2? Don't see any. So let's invite public comment on item number 1, the Yellowstone County proposed short-term holding facility. If you'd like to comment on that, please come to the podium. We just ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address. Do we have any public comment on item number 1? No one is coming forward, so we will close public comment on item number 1. If there's nothing else, Council. Chris, sounds like you've got your marching orders, and gives us the thumbs up, so we'll move on to item number 2. Montana Rescue Mission overview. We're fortunate to have Matt Lundgren, the Executive Director. Matt, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Matt Lundgren, 2902 Minnesota Avenue. Mayor and Council, thanks for the invitation to come and give you a little update on our project. Special warm welcome to the new members of Council, whether you're on Zoom or you're in the room. Good to see you again. Many of you went through on a walking tour here, maybe 6 months or a year or 2 years, time goes. But I wanted to share with you tonight, I've got some PowerPoint slides that I know your staff is going to pull up. And Chris is like, wait, what? Yes, I did send those.
They exist, they're in the packet.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I don't think the microphone is working at the podium.
Thank you, Councilor Rasselleiter.
Oh, there you go.
There.
I'm sorry. I was telling some really good jokes.
We were laughing hysterically
Yeah.
here.
While he pulls up the PowerPoint, I just want to read a little correspondence I got just this past week. Dear Pastor Matt, in the early 80s, our son had some problems with the law and got into big trouble because of drugs and alcohol and made a trip to Deer Lodge and spent decades there. After he got out, he got into trouble again. And rather than going back to Deer Lodge, he found his way to the Montana Rescue Mission. Your people did a tremendous work with him, and over the next several months, he had headway. In fact, he had more headway than his mother and I had with him in 40 years. And while he's been on a bumpy road ever since, and while we don't see eye to eye with him on too many things, and while his mother worried about him for 40 years, we were thankful that he got set on the right path when he spent his time with you. His mother passed away here in October of 2023, and she would approve of this donation. We wish we could give more, but please apply this donation to your building program and building your new shelter, and keep up the great work with people like our son. Sincerely, Ken and Margaret Peterson. What I wanted to say tonight is our project is on track, and hey, I know it's going to come. I sent in the packet just a couple of documents just for your awareness. One is from the Coalition to Solve Homelessness. That's a statewide coalition. This talks about how homelessness is increasing due to also increased rents and increased population growth in Montana. I think this is just some fascinating data that's collected from all the shelters throughout Montana. And the second document that I like to say is kind of who we are and what we serve. Some of you have seen this before, but this really lays the foundation of who we are and what we do. It's always best to define ourselves rather than let others to define us. So what I'd like to do is now briefly just run you through where the construction project is now. So perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate your help. So this should advance.
Point it toward the computer.
There we go. Well, you're in the front entryway to the new Montana Rescue Mission shelter. You're going to have a secure entry, and those in the criminal justice system know this is what they call a sally port. You can come in, but you can't go any further. Right at the front desk, we'll be able to say, how can we help you? My staff will be behind bulletproof glass, which we've found to be a necessity. And there, people will be able to be processed to say, oh, you're a regular shelter guest, you come on in. You'll be buzzed in. If you're not, you'll go to the left into the intake office. You'll be able to have, with dignity, a private office where you can be with your case manager doing an intake, asking what we can do for you, how we can help. Once you're processed, we're going to have a spot where you can literally do all people's laundry, take their stuff, bake it for a while to get rid of any contaminants that may come into the buildings, and then they can enter in. While they're there, we'll provide them with a clean set of clothes, everything they need. Also, right inside the front wall is going to be 6 showers for the community. Right now, we have 1 for the community that's been available since 1943, but we're having 6, which is really going to take the load off and also speed things up, right? That's really an important thing. So we're going to walk you through just a couple more pictures. This is kind of the main hallway. This front room here is kind of the main laundry facility for the shelter. Right now, we have 3 washers, 2 dryers. And last night, we had over 250 people. So we're doing laundry 24/7, 365, and constantly going to laundromats. Our new building will have 45 washers and 45 dryers. So it's going to change the world for us, and my staff is going to appreciate it. That's a way down to the lowest level of care, what we call our emergency shelter. There's an elevator down. There's also handicapped accessible ramps, and then this is kind of the main 4-foot wide stairway. For people, there's going to be a separate, like I said, separate entrance, separate spot for people in emergency shelter they're actively using. We still have that for folks. We're still doing it today, but this will be a separate entrance where people can be safe and have the care that they need, separate from those who are actively working on their recovery and separate from working in their program. There's some more of the laundry hookups. This is the building yesterday, so it's pretty up to date. So that's several of the laundry that's going in. That is that case management office. Like I said, it's hard to tell, but I know it's going to be a lot better later. This is kind of the main hallway out the back. We're insulating every room. Right now we have barracks. There's 100 beds in the men's side, 100 beds in the women's side. Now there's going to be rooms for 4 to 6 with their own bathroom. So much more humane, so much more dignified, and each room will be insulated so you're not hearing the baby crying next door or the man snoring next door, or the people that are working nights can be in a room, right? These are all just things that we've been wanting to do for years, and it's happening. Our donors have been tremendous and have really stepped up to help us. This is looking upstairs at the apartments. There's going to be 29 apartments added to the low-income rental pool for our community. Really important, and we're partnering with the Housing Authority of Billings to get these as a project-based voucher. So people with a Section 8 voucher, with disabilities, people that need permanent supportive housing can all live with us. Like I said, we've been doing this since the 1940s. This is really going to take us into the next century because of all these additions that we're doing. Mechanical stuff. This is some of the apartments upstairs. They actually did a little bit more. This is a little bit old, but sheetrock is up now. There's everything from efficiency, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, and loft. So we could take a family of up to 10 or 12 in some of these apartments, or just a single person depending on their needs, which is really going to help the homeless folks literally go from the street to the shelter to an apartment and then on. I know my aim is not that bad. There we go. Just some more of the construction stuff. It's no injuries, no accidents on our job so far, over 2 years of work. So good news, we're very thankful. That's another view of that lowest level of care. There'll be bathrooms there in the emergency shelter. There'll be separate quarters for men, women, families, unique individuals. We're going to have an exercise room. Also in the lower level is some of our training academies. There's going to be a shop to learn woodworking, a shop to learn retail, a shop to learn culinary, a shop to learn welding, a shop to learn auto repair. Getting people out of homelessness takes jobs, takes careers, and that's part of what's going to happen in this space. Looking back up those stairs that I talked about before, I really am pressing the button. I don't know if I've got a bad connection or I'm just not a good aim. There we go. Some more photographs. There we go. This is the Life Change building. In the Life Change building is where we're going to have our medical clinic, which does mental health care, primary health work. It's also where we're going to have the child care center for 0 to 3. On the female side, our number one person who comes to us is typically a woman in her 20s that has 2 kids in tow. Hard for her to finish her GED or to have a job if she has 2 under 2. So we're partnering with Friendship House, another one of the organizations in our orbit, to provide child care for 0 to 3. It'll be a state licensed child care, and it'll provide a critical need, because right now there's a long waiting list for 0 to 3 child care, as well as for apartments. So we're really helping to contribute to the betterment of society and getting people off of the street and onto our campus. Another view of our campus, our new chapel will be in this side. Our current chapel seats 75. Like I said, last night we had over 250. Can't even have everyone in at once. This new space will accommodate everyone and will really help to meet the need for spiritual care and also large group meetings and just caring for the community. This space is also part of, once upon a time, way back, TIF funding helped to provide about $400,000 for our project. And part of what we promised is community can hold meetings in here, people can do events, whatnot. And that part of that space that we promised, and it's under construction as we speak. That's the outside of the building. It started out as an auto dealership back in the early 1910s and 20s. Then it was a grocery store. Then it was our thrift store. Now it's our Life Change building. You can see that what they call EFIS, which is like stucco, is up. All the roof is on. The walls are insulated. That's the building where the Life Change programming happens. That's the front of it. Really made an upgrade for the neighborhood. It was kind of a dilapidated looking building, so it's really looking nice. Another corner shot, kitty corner from the Rail Line Coffee. And that's what it looked like when finished with those metal panels to kind of blend in with the rest of the neighborhood. I'm sorry, and I'm really pressing a button. Thank you. That's a look from the top down, from the top of the current shelter building down. We are enclosing the whole campus behind a fence. And the outdoor campus is going to have the child care playground. You see that kind of lower area think he said there's a laser. It's the red one, yeah. So that's where the childcare, there's going to be a playground there. That'll all be fenced off for the childcare and for kids at the shelter. This will be a fire pit for our shelter guests. This area here will be a fountain, a water fountain. Out here will be an outdoor stage in the corner, and then picnic tables, and then kind of a smoking area off here. We want to make it so attractive that the homeless want to be with us rather than in a doorway downtown. We want to serve this community so well that people say, I want to be there. So you can be hanging out at the fire pit, at the water fountain, listening to music on the stage. Also, this will allow us to do outdoor church services, classes, whatnot, just a place for people to hang out. So they're not at the library, they're not in Dorfrace. We want them with us. And I think that's it. Thank you so much for letting me give an update. Any of you that would like to do a tour, I did a tour of our legislative contingent from Yellowstone County last week. I know some of you were there a couple weeks before that, but I'm always ready and willing to give a tour and tell you about what we do. But we're thankful to serve this community, and we really hope that the work that we do can help with things such as public safety, which is really important to all of us.
Very much. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for your efforts and your staff's efforts on this very important project. I did get an opportunity to take that tour, and I highly recommend council members to follow up on Matt's offer. And I don't know what the arrangements would be if you do it as a group or just have people send you an email, or if they want a tour, how they arrange that.
They can contact me directly, and we have tours going every week, and they can jump onto that. Or if someone doesn't work with their schedule, I'm happy to do a private showing for a sizable donation, of course.
Okay. All right. So there are regularly scheduled tours, so you're not causing any problem if you want to jump on board of those. Councilmember, questions for Matt. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you. How many people do you service now, currently, and how many people will be able to be serviced with the new facility once it opens?
Yeah, so right now we have 200 beds, so that means a mattress in a frame and the whole bed. The new building will have 400 beds, right? So we're doubling that. But like I said, last night we had more than 250, so that means that some of our folks are on a mattress on the floor. That's not ideal, but it's better than being out under a bridge or out under the weather, right? Especially 2 weeks ago when it was 20 below. So we're going to actually have bed frames, you know, like I said, individual rooms, dressers, and all that. So we're going to be able to double our capacity. Our goal is not to increase homelessness. Our goal is to end homelessness. And in the last 12 months, we put more than 700 people into permanent housing. So 700 people would be on the streets of Billings if it weren't for the work that we have done in the last 12 months. So our goal is to get them through our programming, jobs, sobriety, mental health care, back into society as taxpaying members.
Thank you very much. Other questions for Matt? Don't see any hands up. So I guess we'll call that a wrap. Thanks very much, Matt.
Thank you
Stick
very
around. We'll have an opportunity for public comment. This is item number 2. You've heard Matt's presentation. If anybody would like to comment, please feel free to do so. Just come to the podium and just ask for your name and that you keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Catherine Card, 2815 4th Avenue South. I appreciate that presentation. It sounds good. But I think you have to ask what's the truth, because when you say 400 beds or even 200 beds, or when Matt says that they're serving 250 people. There's no way to verify that. They're not participating in HIMAS. They're not participating with the other providers. So how do you know? How do I know what they're actually serving? They're not a low barrier shelter. Will this new place be a low barrier shelter? They're not a low barrier shelter now because they require people to, unless they come into their programs, to stay only 14 days a year. That's the homeless. That's welcoming the homeless of this community that they're doing. Yeah. They're not handicapped accessible. Did you hear anything about that?
And actually, the new facility will, I think Matt commented that there would be a couple elevators and ramp.
But they're not currently. Currently, we have a problem with people on the street because they do not feel welcome. They cannot get in there, And they are afraid of using up that 14 days a year because they might need it for the really bad weather that's coming. So they're out on the street. I see them every week at our showers, and I get stories. So I really ask you, when you hear the report, it sounds nice. We've had 2 years of reporting like this from MRM. Sounds really nice. But in practice, it's not meeting the need. And I wonder in the future with not only the theology that MRM is operated on, but the ethics, will people actually be welcomed? Will they actually be
Appropriate
received?
to be questioned.
I'm sorry, I'm speaking.
I think that's wildly out of context.
I think I have the floor, and I think you need to turn your time back.
Go ahead.
Will they function any different, any better than what they're doing now? What the public is told, what you are told, and what you are gullible enough to believe, if you believe it, is that there is a low barrier shelter. No, there is no low barrier shelter. Do, in fact, MRM leadership really intend a low barrier shelter? And to treat the people of this community, your neighbors, my neighbors who are homeless, well, and according to Christ's teaching is what they profess they're doing. Will that take place? That's the question.
Thank you. Thank you. We hear you. Are there others who would like to be heard on this item? No one is coming forward, so we will close the public comment period on item number 2 and move on to item number 3, our crisis response unit, mobile response unit update.
Mayor?
Councilmember Rupsis.
If it would be okay, could I have one quick question for Matt to address something that Catherine talked about?
Sure. Matt, if you'd come forward, we've got a question for you.
Matt, I just want to give you an opportunity to address one of the things that Catherine was talking about, and it's this 14-day policy. We've heard different staff people at MRM give different accountings of what this 14-day policy is. Can you please explain to us what the actual policy is and what those 14 days are used for, what they mean?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to come up again. I appreciate that. Councilmember Rupsis, so every individual is treated differently based on their needs, right? So if someone comes in and they're very high on heroin or meth, it might take them a week or two just to detox before they can even talk to someone. So there's not a hard and set 14-day policy that you can stay 14 days and you have to be out. It's on a case-by-case basis. What we do ask is, during the first 2 weeks that you're with us, that you talk to someone. Talk to the chaplain, talk to a case manager, talk to the staff and say, why are you here? What do you need? Our emergency shelter is set up so that someone can come in very drunk, very high, wherever they are, and we're going to meet their need, provided they're not a danger to themselves or to others, right? And so if they come in and maybe they're so high they can't talk to someone or they don't want to, or they're so drunk they come in and put their head down, and then when they wake up they walk out. That person is not communicative. So we ask them in the first 2 weeks, we say, will you please talk to us? During the time they're with us, when they come in, they have a hot meal. And then when they leave in the morning, they have a hot breakfast before they go. Then they're sent back out. And every day, we try to meet with those folks and say, come on in, be a part of our programming. 2 weeks ago, when it was over 20 degrees below, we had over 300 in the building. And during that time, many people that don't normally stay with us came in. And I'm happy to report that my staff talked to several, and 9 individuals decided that they no longer want to live on the street. They decided they want to stay with us. So 9 individuals transitioned from the emergency shelter into our long-term program because they realized, hey, you know, being in a tent is not awesome in the winter in Montana. I'd like to be a part of your program. So that's what we do. We provide opportunities for folks. And yes, we have an emergency shelter, and we always have, and we always will, and we're going to continue to serve people. Whether it's defined as low barrier or emergency, we're serving those people who are most vulnerable. And there's not a hard and fast rule that it's only 14 days and then they're used up. That is completely false. It's on a case-by-case basis. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Nice?
Yeah.
Did you still want Matt here?
Yeah, Matt.
Okay.
Just real quick. Do the police bring people that they find in the street to your facility to help them?
Yeah, the police can bring people to us. My staff has been to all the briefings of the different shifts to say, here's what we do, here's who you can bring. From time to time, officers do bring people. From time to time, the sheriff's department brings people. That's always an option, right? And we're happy to receive those folks, once again, provided that they're not going to come in beating people up or they're going to start cutting their own wrists or something.
Do you know how often the police are happen to be bringing people for you to help?
My staff keeps record of that. I'm not at the front desk, so I can't provide that right off the top.
And then do you have to call the police often to your facility to where you have incidences that you have to address?
Great question. So we do call the police from time to time. I also employ 3 full-time security guards that work to try to assist my staff to de-escalate things, to help. But that's an expense that we've taken on because we don't want to call the police, but we do often call the ambulance and we call 911 because people who are homeless, who've been living on the streets, might have severe frostbite and they come in and they realize, boy, we need a doctor, or they have such poor health that when they come in, they realize, you know, my abscessed tooth is killing me or I'm having a heart attack or whatever. So I would say that several times a week we're calling 911. It's not because we want to, it's because we serve probably the most vulnerable population with the most health needs and frankly the most mental illness. And so someone that comes in that's mentally ill and high and they're bleeding profusely, we're not equipped to deal with that. And so the staff of 911, whether it be the police, the fire, they're there. And like I said, I've also met with the fire chief and said, you know, we're trying our best to limit those calls. And I think both of these gentlemen would attest to the fact I've been in and said, we want to cut those calls down, but we also recognize these people need help too. And if we're not equipped to do it, I'd rather not have people die, right? We'd rather get them to help.
Great, thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That then concludes item number 2, and now we move on to item number 3, our crisis response unit update. So this is Chief Banfield. It's all yours, I guess.
Mayor, Council, good evening, and all the new council members. Just here to give you kind of an update. We started this program back in October. This was a joint venture between us and Rimrock Foundation. Jeff Keller's behind me, and we also have some support of the Substance Abuse Connect and Zach Tarakitis. So just going to give you guys a quick update. It's not a lot of data. Unfortunately, we've only been functioning for 3 months, 4 months.
Matt Lundgren broke it.
Yep. Yeah, see, we break everything every time. It's always us. No, I think you're dead. Maybe. Okay. Well, there it is. Do the advance. There it is, yay. So Chief Valdez is going to come up and also talk at the end of this about our mobile response teams. That was all recognized in the CPSM study. Obviously, that was brought in by a third party to make sure that we are creating the most efficient programs we can to serve the public. We realize that we need to relieve pressure off our systems and create the efficiencies that we don't have large fire trucks going on calls that we shouldn't. So for the crisis response unit, one of the other pieces that we work well with Chief St. John is that we have the ability to get those officers back to regular calls. Because during these crisis emergency responses, and if we have somebody with substance abuse, we're sending a fire truck, an ambulance, and a police officer. So our goal is to release those and then create the best atmosphere we can for those patients so that they'll actually talk to somebody and they have avenues for care. As you can see, better patient outcomes are super important for us. And then, of course, we have to have, greater maintenance and fuel efficiency on our large equipment and keep those in place as those get more expensive throughout the years. We keep purchasing them.
Chief, can I ask you to lift the microphone just a little bit up to closer? There you go. Thank
There,
you.
perfect. I didn't know I was that tall. The Mobile Crisis Response Unit obviously is a multi-agency. We've partnered with, as I said, Rimrock Foundation. We have a clinician in there who has a master's degree, and they're the ones that are doing the de-escalation process and pushing those patients into the right direction. Obviously, we need to identify who they are in our community quicker and get those services to them faster, and building trust and promoting this is the next aspect of what we do. As you can see, the clinician and the care team, we have a care coordinator. I'm basically the BFD supervisor when I'm not there. Kim McCamley is supporting that. We work with some of the peer support people and the homeless outreach team downtown, and a Rimrock supervisor. So that really makes up the team. The biggest work on this, though, is done at Rimrock on the care management on the end piece. We got a gal named Casey Lepper is doing a phenomenal job for us and moving those patients towards their goals. Maybe. Now it's not gonna work. Types of calls we respond to, obviously it's the suicide attempts. We are doing some welfare checks, death calls where we do some bereavement for the family members, death notifications with coroner support because family members that's a big trauma for them. Substance abuse evaluations in the field, psychotic or patients, and adolescent behavior calls. We're now starting to see this move into the youth areas. And then, of course, most of our calls are just a lot of de-escalation to keep, there's no negative impacts when we're with police officers. Call to what we're not going on. We've got to keep this unit safe. We always still respond with the police department. If there's weapons involved, they may be called to the area, but they're staged to protect them. Where the patient, what we don't do is, if that patient needs a ton of medicine, if they're not compliant, they still need to go to the hospital. Transient specific issues, a lot of that is just the housing piece that we're missing in our community. And then many calls with law enforcement that, if they're threatened or feel that they need to stage. So one of the other pieces of what this is, and you'll see on our graph coming up here, is we still have to take PD with us when we go out and do the case management. If you look at the calls by day of week, you can see that Monday is a big day, and that's some of that is the case management follow-up, where we don't feel comfortable sending that case manager out by themselves, so we will pick them up and we'll take them in the crisis response vehicle to make sure that they're safe, because it's a single gal doing that work. Calls by time of day, typically most of the stuff that we are seeing is between 4 and 8 o'clock at night. That's the bulk of our calls. We are only functioning from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. We are not a 24-hour service. And then also you can see the calls per station. Obviously the Station 1 area is very busy for us, and also Station 5. Last time we were up here, we talked about how we were gonna, try and get some of this data to you guys and kind of split it out better. You can see we brought it all to you for transparency, but what you can see is the big two numbers are, if you look down that left graph, you see public service assistance other. That's what's generated from the police department. That's who's requesting us to come and support that service side. And then all the other calls total up to about the other quarter of it. So that's generated through 911, other systems, AMR, and the fire department where they're attached to the call. So on the medicine side, we're about a fourth of it, and on the police side, we're about another 3/4 of that. On the right-hand side, you can see we have what's called disposition codes. You guys asked us how to split this out, if we could show how we were by agency, and if there was an ALS or BLS component to that, and the demographic we were serving. The demographic we were serving mostly is adults. Elderly patients are part of that, and also the youth dynamic is coming into play in our community. So that's kind of the end of what's happening with the crisis response. You guys got questions for me on that before Chief Valdez starts on the MRTs?
Questions for Assistant Chief? We can come back also if you got questions later. So, Chief Valdez.
This will be really brief, so your questions will be fresh in your mind, trust me on that. So tonight I'll give a brief update on the other program, the mobile response teams. And the last update, I believe, for this particular program was in August. And the message will be pretty much the same. It's very successful. We're very proud of that, and we continue to see positive results in this particular program. If you remember, we had to stagger the dates for the implementation of the two different squads. And the reason for that was mostly budgetary and logistical. So we split the fiscal year between squads 1 and squad 2. Let's see, what we had found over this period of time before we implemented the squads in any given calendar year, what we found is engines 1, engine 2, and truck 1 were spending about 10% of their time in the heights to backfill for various reasons, whether it was a ride-in to the hospital, fleet maintenance issues, or training. And so now, since the implementation of the squads, we're seeing that those same units are spending less than 1% of their time out of area, which is a big deal for us. The quality of training for multi-company drills is increasing due to fewer interruptions. For example, our multi-company drills is 2 to 3 engines at a time, and we have to get repetition and timing down in those drills, and we're constantly getting interrupted with low acuity type calls. Well, now these squads can handle those for us, and we're getting, like I said, increased quality in our training. We've also realized that our newly promoted captains are easing into this position now. So what happens is most of the time they'll get assigned to these smaller squads, less capabilities with just a 2-person crew. So when the time comes for them to transition to a fully capable, fully staffed engine, the transition is a lot easier for them. Here you can see at the top graph shows the 2023 calls for service for both squads. Now keep in mind, Squad 2 didn't start until July 10th of 23, so just this last summer. And in 23, we ran a total of 17,910 calls. Between the two squads, they were able to respond to almost 3,600 of those calls, so about 20% of the call volume they're able to grab for us, keeping our engines at a higher state of readiness. The bottom left is Squad 1 since inception, and the bottom right is Squad 2 since inception. Okay. So as stated earlier, this is a 2-person crew that has a captain and a paramedic on this particular unit. Now, the City of Billings Fire Department is now currently the largest employer of paramedics in the state of Montana. And what we were concerned about was skills dilution and skills degradation. We're no longer concerned about that, A, because of the calls for service or the call volume and the type of calls that they go on. So this particular unit is focused on high acuity type calls. So they're seeing all the traumas, the heart attacks, and your strokes. And so because of that, they're able to keep their skills sharpened, and it also spills into what we call advanced early notification. And what that is our units are able to get on scene pretty quickly and relay to the ERs, the receiving ERs, what is coming at them. There's a lot of buzzwords involved, and so it prepares the ERs for what's coming, providing for a much better patient outcome in the end, is what we're seeing. So we're getting a lot of high praise from the hospitals because of this advanced early notification. And lastly, what I wanted to talk about, in conjunction with priority dispatch, proximity dispatch, which you guys have heard me talk about before, we've been flirting with that with some positive results. We'll probably start to see that go live in April. New emergency medical dispatch protocols, station alerting, and the crew, we fully anticipate response times reduced here in the near future. So stay tuned for that as we continue to flirt with our 911 center and how they dispatch.
Very good. Questions
Questions?
for either chief, Councilmember Gillick.
Chief Edos, you gave some examples, but I'll just pose a few questions, and it's definitely also for Chief Banfield. What are you learning? What's working really well, and what are areas that you're finding now that you need to rework? And that'll, again, apply to the CRUs as well.
Sure. As for the squads, we've been doing a ton of research across the country. This is not a new program. I think you've heard me talk about it before. This is a 50-year-old concept. I don't know for any of you that are nerds like myself that watched Emergency back in the 70s. It was LA County Fire Department that came up with this concept back in 1970. So it's not a new concept by any means, but what is unique for our community is that these squads, like I said, are able to get our police department back in service relatively quickly, keep our engines either in training or in quarters more often. Another example with these really low temps that we had just a couple weeks ago, we were able to keep our engines in station more. I hate to use the term expendable, but these $40,000 to $50,000 squads are a lot better alternative than sending out $1 million rig in temperatures like that. Training, better training for our captains, better training for multi-company units. All of that I just mentioned are the things that we're learning, and we'll continue to tweak and adjust as we go. While their main focus is high acuity medical calls, because of the sheer manpower, we're able to use them on structure fires, rescues, hazardous material calls. So we have those extra hands for those low frequency, high risk type of calls.
Thank you. Councilmember Gillick, do you have that same question for Councilmember or for Assistant Chief Banfield? Okay. Would you repeat it for his benefit and our benefit?
Sure. Thanks, Chief Banfield. What are you, now that we're 4 or 5 months into things, what are you learning? What's working really well, and what are some areas that need to be worked, continue to be rethought, I guess, as you've got some experience?
I'd say in the 4 months, what we've learned is just what this population serves, and trying to just make those connections with other services. We now have inside that team a book of business, and we're forming relationships across School District 2, across the university systems, and just to try and bring that out front. I believe our shortcomings are just kind of trust in the system, see where they're falling in. Police department wants to make sure that we're super safe. And so there's some work to be done in there too. Whether they're leaving too early or not early enough. And that's being worked out by the crews. And they're having those conversations out there. And it's just gaining the trust between both of those units.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Owen has her hand up.
Yeah, actually, that was a great intro to my question, because I was hoping, Captain Banfield, you could be a little more specific about what we're seeing as the impact on BPD patrol. I was looking at this slide, I think it's slide 6, that goes through the average response times, and I'm not totally sure I understand them. So I was hoping you could explain that and then maybe put that in context of what the crew is meaning for BPD's time on scene, ability to clear and go to other calls, that kind of thing.
Correct. So what you're starting to see out there is, I believe we took 68 calls of service off the Billings Police Department where they'd be able to show up and relieve them sooner than what they would. Now, the severity of the call matters. So I can't tell you if one officer was on scene or 3, depending on the initial dispatch. But if you think about that, if 3 officers show up on a scene, the unit's able to clear at least 2 of them, get them back into service for the call volume that's going on for them. So that's 68 calls just in the last, that we made an impact with the Billings Police Department. And Jennifer, Councilwoman Owen, what was your other question?
I just didn't quite understand those average response times on that slide.
Yes, and so our response times are kind of slow. Using 988, where these calls are originating from, it's a lot more gathering that's happening in our EMD protocols, and so that takes a little longer to dispatch. We know that these are not emergent calls for service, so we don't have that unit going code. And that's just a risk liability thing that we've decided to do that way. It just makes sure that as long as somebody's with that patient, if PD's there for a little bit, we're gonna drive, no code to service that. Now that impact's kind of negative if they're out in the Heights and they've got to go out to 48th Street West or another call. So that does affect our response times.
So for example, when your slide says dispatch to arrival 12 minutes, that doesn't mean that no one has arrived. It means the crew hasn't arrived yet.
Correct, that's the stat,
Okay.
the stat for the crisis response unit.
Thank you.
Bet.
Very good, thank you. Other questions, Councilmember Joy?
Thank you. I was wondering if you could give us a little update on the Medicaid reimbursement.
So what's happening with that is it's at the state, and I have Zach Tarakitis behind me, could probably speak better to that, and he can give us more of an update. Right now, we are using grant funding to support that until we hear back from the state. This was one of our fears when we started this program. How can we build sustainability? So I guess I'll let him speak to this a little bit because he has a better eyeball on the legislative pieces in state.
Hi, thanks, Mayor and Council. So in regards to Medicaid, the Medicaid reimbursement rates were supposed to be approved on July 1st, 2023. They still have not been approved. The rules have been up and down through there. Since then, we started in October, so October, November, and December were an extension of the crisis diversion grant that they pulled funding from a variety of other sources to backfill what was needing to be paid on behavioral health side of things. I called the state today. The Behavioral Health for Future Generations, HB 872, they just dedicated money, $3.2 million for the next year that will continue to support the 7 existing communities that have mobile crisis until those Medicaid rules get approved. And that should also provide a little bit of buffer. Once again, we have another conversation on Wednesday to drill down what that means exactly, because once again, we're pretty behind on the Medicaid rules. I don't want to call Medicaid a disaster, but I think that's probably fair when you're 4 to 6 months behind on paying your bills. It's not necessarily appropriate, and it's really having an impact on the population that needs to be served. And we're seeing a lot of different services having to, respond to that lack of reimbursement. But the state is trying to plug the gaps specifically for mobile crisis because of the results they're seeing across the state. It's become very important to all communities because of the quality of care, and it's keeping people with mental health issues out of the law enforcement system, because mental health doesn't become, criminal until the behavior changes because of what they're experiencing. So again, it was a positive conversation for the continuity of what the services we have in place right now. But the Medicaid rules still are not approved. And once that does come online, we'll have better details. This week, it's very slow, but we're almost on a call weekly to figure out what's going to happen there.
Zach, can you just clarify, the Medicaid reimbursement, is that only for the Rimrock counseling component of this, or is that something that the city actually can tap into? I'm assuming it's Rimrock only, but correct me if I'm wrong.
The current structure is around the behavioral health side of the team. Now, just today, the conversation was that any care coordination that, and Jason, I don't think knows this yet either, because literally it's at 4:15 today, I'm calling to just to verify where are we at for sure, was that if that care coordination changes over and there's another member of the team that's able to take a portion of that on, all of those will be reimbursable on both sides. But the majority of Medicaid reimbursement is going to fall on the side of the behavioral health partners. So grant funding, local resources, like the rest of the crisis now, like our crisis stabilization with the crisis center, every study that's been done, you always have to have some sort of local investment in crisis services to backfill. There is the conversation about how do we fill for the non-Medicaid clients that are receiving services, because private insurance doesn't cover mobile response, which needs to be remedied at some point as these types of programs grow. So I think that's where you're always going to see local investment have to be in place.
Okay, if I can ask Jason, and since we're talking about money, the final line of our staff report says that the CHEG COVID-19 Health Equity Grant will cover the cost of EMS providers' wages until May of 2024. That's most of the way through our fiscal year 24. My understanding is we had $236,000 or so set aside to cover those costs, and maybe some additional equipment costs. But if that's being picked up by the grant, does that mean we're going to have excess, we're going to have reserves, we're going to have unspent dollars from those budgeted dollars that we could put towards something else? For example, a 72-hour holding facility at the Yellowstone County Detention Facility. So can you just address whether that we're going to see some reserves out of that one?
Well, there is going to be some reserves out of that. That COVID Health Equity Grant, I think it's $144,000 going to offset that cost. But I am working with administration right now. We have another increased cost. As you guys know, we are the largest paramedic employer in the state, and we're providing that service with ALS paramedic engine companies. We're almost be able to do that full time on every one of them, plus the 2 MRTs. What's driving the cost is medical equipment costs. So what you're starting to see is we have to go out. We purchased cardiac monitors about 9 years ago, and those are no longer being serviced. And they went from $30-some thousand to $60. So replacement cost of that is coming up here shortly too. So just keep in mind when you're taking money away from me.
Shoot. Okay, other questions for either of our chiefs? Councilmember Rupsis?
Chief Valdez, just want to ask, I think you said we're covering about 20% of total calls with the mobile response teams now. But I think it was, I don't remember the exact number, but like 80+% of calls don't require an engine. Where do you see the ceiling for what those mobile response teams could do if they were expanded, to whatever point of maximum efficiency you might gain from, having more of those relative to your engines?
Excellent question, and that's something we're just continuing to tinker with. As time goes, we'll continue to gather the data, trying to, we're trying to put our heads together and figure out what does that perfect system look like for us, for this particular community. Right now, if I had all the money in the world, I would say a 2-to-1 system right now. So every one squad to every 2 engines, I think would be perfect for this community. Short answer. You bet.
Okay, other questions for chiefs before we invite public comment on this item? Chris?
I just don't want to pass the opportunity I know you got this by email, but Chief, can you comment on the fact that we did get some phenomenal news last week? And I'll say that I'll assume part of that news is tied to MRTs and CRUs relative to response times. So can you just comment about our new ISO rating as a city?
That is correct. As Chris has alluded to, as of last week, we got our official letter in the mail, and the first time in Billings' history, our fire department's ISO, and for those of you that don't know what ISO is, Insurance Service Office. And basically they come in and they rate our department and tell us if we're in poor shape or in good shape. And for the first time in our history, we are at a rating of a 2. Very proud of that and all the hard work that our people have done and all the support from council in this community. It has the potential to decrease insurance premiums for both residential and commercial. Not every insurance company abides by it, but it's incumbent upon the individuals to reach out to their insurance and let them know that it is now official that we are an ISO of 2. So very proud.
Very good. Thank you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
That is good news for our community.
Thank you.
Okay, let's open this up for public comment on item number 2, this update we've had on both the crisis response units and the mobile response units. If you'd like to comment, please come to the podium and tell us your name. And keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Catherine Card. 2815 4th Avenue South. I just have a small comment. Words are really important, particularly in this setting of elected officials and public discussions. The word transient was used in the presentation, I think, and I may be wrong, to refer to the unhoused, to homeless people. That immediately gives the idea that those people are not here for a long time. They're just passing through. They don't, they have no value or little value or less value than you guys who've lived here a long time. But transient, it means short time. And yet most of the unhoused people I have dealt with in the last 5 years, and I deal with them now each week and every other day, have been here a long time, have connections in the community, and have, many have gone to school here and have ties. They are your constituents. They are fellow members of the community, and transient does not describe them as a whole. So I ask that presentations and use that word very sparingly for the unhoused.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment on item number 3? No one is coming forward, so we will close the public comment. And if there's nothing else on this item, council, we'll move to item number 4, which is our domestic violence investigation unit discussion. Chief St. John.
Mayor, council, good evening. Stepping back a little bit, this pains me to say it, but way to go, fire department. Yeah, nice job on the crew side of things specifically. We notice it. I hear it on the radio. It's an outstanding program. It's being run really well. It's making a difference. And it'll only get better as we add resources. So nice job by our brethren in the fire service. To item 4, Mayor and Council, the memo that you received in your packet is in response to Councilmember Owen's initiative regarding looking into the establishment of a family violence investigative unit. I'm here to basically tee that conversation off. I know that you got that document, you read it very closely, you studied it, and so there's nothing that I'm going to delve into in the document specifically, but I do want to make a couple bullet points for you. Specifically, and in this particular case, on behalf of the city attorney's office, there is nobody in either one of our departments that doesn't think that this is a significant situation and something that we want to do our very best at. We want to provide the very best service, be as effective and efficient as we can to help the victims of domestic and family violence. You will find nobody that says that this is a bad idea. Second, for the police department specifically, we, as you're well aware, are operating under a hard cap budget and allowable staffing. We have a staffing ceiling on where we are supposed to be at based on our budget authority and with your permission and the administration. Although the initiative did not give clear instructions about new FTEs other than don't look at that, I did anyway. That was the number one recommendation coming out of the department to make this work. I think what it does is it falls in line with a letter that you received from our union this afternoon, essentially calling for additional staffing across the board in the police department. That's what I really wanted to highlight. Again, the document speaks for itself, and I would open it up for your discussion or questions on the topic.
Okay, thank you very much. Chief, I'll just start us off on page 7 of the memo, and for any members of the public who might be listening, the chief is referring to a lengthy memo that he and his staff generated that is available to you on the city website. If you just go to City Council packet, and for today's meeting under this item number 4, you can get a copy of that memo. But on page 7, there's some recommendations. And if I counted correctly, there's 7 recommendations that are definitely responsive to Councilmember Owen's initiative, asking for recommendations in ways that do not add FTEs and hence just don't cost as much. So we don't want to lose track of those 7. There's some very difficult questions, of course, about priority and adding staffing and reallocating staffing from one part of the department to another. Those are the hard questions, but just so we don't lose track of it, is it relatively a no-brainer or an easy question just to say that you should go forward and implement these 7? Is that the starting point for this discussion?
Absolutely, Mayor. And I think the one thing that the council members' initiative allowed us to do is really dive into this a lot deeper than we have before. I think you saw the list of people that we consulted with, the internal staff. This is a 4th iteration of this document, getting it to something that is workable. And though the immediate recommendations are very doable and something we can start on. And the number one thing I would say is that in order to increase the capacity and free up time for our DVI, specifically Detective Nash, who's here in the audience, is to offload some of the grant responsibilities, whether it's the writing or the administration. Not quite sure what that would look like, but that takes an awful lot of time on top of the crime fighting that she's trying to do. And so that, I think, is a priority to look, how can we free up her time to spend more time on the investigation side of things. Training was a big issue with Councilmember Owens, and I don't mean to speak for her. She's online there, but we already have lined out some additional training for our patrol officers. So we want to establish and maintain a more robust domestic abuse, domestic violence, family violence training regimen. We get it in the academy, we get it through FTO, but there's some specialties there depending on what you get into. Forensics, if you will, when you're dealing with kids, a whole myriad of things, not to mention the evidence stuff. But training is something that can be bolstered, and we are certainly looking at that. Again, I referenced it in the earlier in the memo. Our department budget for training is, not the biggest. $110,000 for all department training on things, not counting some other specialties. Now we get very creative with hosting training, bringing people here, and we actually can charge and make some money and offset the stuff. But you have to admit, that's really not a big budget. So we need to be looking how we can improve that. But that will help as well. Again, what we're trying to do is be as effective and efficient when we're delivering these services to our victims and citizens.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I can't see whether Councilmember Owen has her hand up.
She does.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Just couldn't see that. So I'm going to turn over to Councilmember Owen. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief. I really can't commend you enough for the quality of work you've put into this. I know it was upsetting to hear an initiative that said no new FTE, and that's not because I don't think that we need additional personnel. We absolutely do. But it's because it's the easy answer to say if we just throw more money at it, we'll fix everything. What I wanted to see was, is there anything that we can do without new resources? And you've really provided council with a good roadmap here. You've given us those things that can be done right now, right away, and then you've given us some real meat to work on in the budget cycle. And I just appreciate that. I appreciate the thoughtfulness, the engagement with legal and city leadership. You've really just done a good job here. And so I appreciate the comprehensiveness of this. You and I had discussed, but I just wanted to hear you say it for all council as to whether or not you believe your recommendation of additional FTE plus the equipment that go with it could be phased in over time, and what kind of time frame you'd be comfortable with.
First council member, thank you for the kind words. It was the staff who helped put this together, and a lot of work with administration as well. Yes, certainly, if we were to do FTEs, we could phase them in. You pick a number. The proposal that was put forth was 6 FTEs, 2 a year, 1 for 6. We'll take people where we can get them. But if you want to make an impact relatively quickly, obviously, more you're bringing on board, sooner we'll be able to do that. And you can extrapolate out what the costs are there on the estimated one on the phased or for FTEs on the bottom of page 7. But it's a much smaller ask than the big number that we were or have been talking about for adding to the department in whole. But that conversation is still out there because this is just addressing one particular issue. And we are better. We are better when we specialize and can focus on something. But we also have to do the respond to calls for service, the 911 stuff. We have to be good there. And that's where we're kind of on the cusp.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Councilor Rowan.
Would it be all right if I asked Officer Nash a question?
Of course. Here she comes.
Mayor and council.
Thank you. Katie, you probably deal with more victims than just about anybody. What do you think a unit like this would do for people who are victimized by partner and family member violence? What do you think your day-to-day would look like with a unit like this in place? And what do you think it would mean to people who are being victimized and may not feel like they want to pursue law enforcement? Do you think this changes things in the community?
That is a good question. I think that if we're talking about a unit as in part of the detectives division, additional investigators, I think it would give a quicker response time. Right now, if I get a case assigned to me for follow-up, it could be done that day. It could be literally months before I make contact with that person, just depending on what the case is, what the follow-up requirements are. If we had additional investigators to help with that, the turnaround time would be a lot quicker. Cases would potentially at least get started through the criminal justice system a little bit quicker. I'm not tied to the radio. So if I'm speaking to a victim who just needs to vent for a while and to talk about the 20 years of violence she experienced, I can sit and have that conversation with her. Patrol officers cannot do that. I don't expect them to do that. They just have calls that they need to get to. So if we had additional investigators who could take that time and really just sit with somebody who needs that, I think it would build some trust for our community members that the police department, you're not just a number, you're a person, we need you to be okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. We've got some other questions on this end. Councilmember Boyette, Councilmember Tidswell.
Chief, I'll give you the hard question for the day. I was a street cop. I want more street cops. So do you want 6 detectives or do you want 6 people on the street? That's a big deal in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that right now, if you were going to give me 6 FTEs, they're going on the street because that's where we're short right now. We're short 5. And I think that's where the first recommendation, where we can make some immediate impact to alleviate some of the pressure on our existing DVIs and do a little bit better job of their training and try to phase some stuff in until such time as we're in a position to move some people around. Again, as you know, we've had this discussion a lot. There's very few problems we can't solve if we throw enough money at it, and that's what we're talking about. Currently, at the police department, we want to do the very best for everybody at everything. And at rough count, we have people assigned to 12 specialized units. So that's anywhere from one officer up to the biggest one, which has 5 or 6. And we carved an officer out of patrol to help us with our gang issue a while back, if you remember. And so everything that those officers do, all of those specialties are incredibly important. And if we weren't doing them, you would feel the impact across the board. And so right now, where those officers come from are the patrol division. That is where all the resources are. They're not coming from detectives, they're coming from patrol. And so, we just can't keep carving away. Now, what has happened in years past is that we've had great public-private partnerships. So School District 2 pays in part for the 8 SROs. Billings Clinic pays 100% of their officers, security officers. Obviously, we negotiate what that salary is. St. V's has started talking with us about hiring officers as well. Assistant Chief was working with them and suggested for the time being, just hire them off duty. I just heard an officer check out working St. V's. Everybody wants a Billings police officer for whatever, and we want to help as best we can. So the trend is now, I don't have anybody else to give you. If you want that, you pay for it, and they have so far. This is a little different situation because it's an in-house thing. But to your question, council member, if you were to give me bodies right now, they're going to patrol. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Tidswell, you had a question? Okay. Councilmember Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify on that, your report says you're down 6 with 7 in background. Are those 6 that you want, those 6, or an increase of
They're on top.
You're authorized, so you want 12 more from where you are today?
No, 6. I'm down 6 officers right now, so the ones in background are going to, let's assume they all get out and we hire them. Okay, now we're up to our authorized strength, which is at 168. 6 on top of that.
And all 12 of those are going to patrol?
Well, yeah, to start with, but under this model, what I proposed, those 6 would go to the new model of the detective division. That's what the proposal was.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions for the chief? I'm not seeing anything. Don't go away.
Mayor, can I?
Go ahead.
Councilmember Rupsis has got the furrowed brow. I don't want to do the bait and switch on you and ask for 6 officers to bolster a DVI unit and then just say, just kidding, and put them in patrol. I don't want to do that to you. I want to make it very clear on what we're asking for based on your discussion, based on direction, based on what our needs are. And if they're going to end up in patrol, you're going to know that. I'm not going to just say, yeah, if you give them, we're going to do this and then move them on you. I don't want you to get in that. Does that help a little bit or make it worse?
I'm sorry. So you get the 6 hired, get you to full staff. I assume those all are going on patrol?
They're going to patrol.
The next 6 are for the DVI unit?
Potentially, if that's the direction that this department, administration, and council wants to go with it, based on the initiative from the council member.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Chief, now I'm a little confused. I just want to make sure, if I heard you say, you obviously want to fill in what you don't have of authorized.
Correct.
But what I was understanding is if you had 6 on top of authorized, new money, new bodies, your preference would still be to put them on patrol ahead of a dedicated DV unit.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kennedy.
Chief, if you had, with a city our size and the problems we've had, and you need more patrol officers, more detectives, what is the ideal amount you would need to fully staff a department for a city this size?
Council member, that question is asked a lot. I would say that we would probably need about 20 more officers across the board to be proportional to the city that we serve. And then from that 20 would go to patrol and other things that we need to staff up. And there are some formulas that, will get you that number or get you close.
So 20, and then if you wanted to fully fund this project, you would need 26.
No, council member, I would take 6 out of the 20.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other questions for the chief? All right, thank you, chief. I'm sorry. Councilmember Assenleiter. Chief, stay put for just a second.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and Chief St. John, thank you for putting this together. I think this was pretty well thought through. There's a lot of information there. There's also a lot of good things I think that we can assist with. I think as part of this conversation, I guess I don't want us to get right now as, this is good information as we head into budget season. That's kind of how I view it and how I'm looking at this. And I guess I'll defer to Councilwoman Owen if, she's thinking any differently. My question or two comments, I guess, are I don't want us to be thinking of this as one or the other. As we go into budget discussions, I think there is going to be a lot of conversation about where we're spending money, if this is prudent along with increasing our patrol. And I think all of those conversations are going to be had as we go through the sausage making of figuring out our budget and where we're going to go with that. The one question I would have for Chief St. John, I guess, is, specific to, you talked about your budget for training and, the limited budget you have for training. Have you had any conversations outside of just the city budget with NGOs, nonprofits, not going out, having Katie go write grants for it, but just our community businesses and community philanthropy about increasing your training budget, particularly around family violence or domestic violence? Has that ever been a part of the conversation?
Council member, yes, we have done that. Not specific to DV that I'm aware of, but we do partner with our community on training things. They host a lot, give us some free slots, things like that. So I'm not opposed to that at all.
And I only bring that up, and this Councilwoman Owen and I kind of started that conversation with some different businesses 12 months ago. I mean, before it was even election season, we had started that conversation with some different businesses and community members around domestic violence. And I guess I would only encourage you, let's talk about that a little bit more. I think there certainly was some motivation from different philanthropists in our community and even from the hospital foundations to funding training. I think where we got lost in that conversation was how we would coordinate that and make sure that was effective training for your staff. So I would just encourage you, I'm happy to help with that. I think we could significantly help you in funding those things. The problem for us on the outside is how do we make sure that we're getting you something that's useful around this topic and making sure that we're doing it in a timely manner to get the most officers possible through the process. So I just encourage you to continue that conversation and I'm happy to help with that in any way I can.
Thank you, Council Member. 2 parts of that. Number one, obviously, we're looking for content-specific training and make sure that we have a qualified instructor. And then second, and we'll be reporting to you budget time, we get a lot of grant money and donations that can be used for training. And so if any of your philanthropist spends wants to donate to and earmark training for DVI, there is a mechanism for that within your process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, it's not really a question, but just kind of a comment. Your fifth item of your immediate recommendations is to request that DCI expedite their filling of their DVI position. Obviously, that's kind of a no-brainer to see that happen. If we can be of any assistance in that, I'm thinking a letter stressing the value, the importance of that. If you think that'd make any difference, I'm sure they're doing what they can, but maybe yes, maybe no. Please, I'd be more than happy to sign that letter. I'm sure the council would grant me the authority to do that. Whatever you see that we can help, I'm sure we're very happy to go down that path.
Thank you, Mayor. If you want to write that letter and keep the date off of it, we'll keep it in your back pocket, but they did assign an investigator.
Oh.
So we are expecting somebody to join the DVI with that. But again, that was an ARPA-funded position. That's why it took so long for them to fill it, because it's potentially part-time for them. And so keep that letter handy, please, because if that person leaves, then we'll be looking for another. But they've been very, very supportive.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mayor.
Looks like Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you. Chief, you said that
Councilmember
you write grants, a lot of grants.
I'm sorry?
You write grants in your department?
We do write grants, yes.
Okay, then my question is to Chris. We have a grant writer. Why wouldn't one grant writer be doing all the grants versus having two different departments writing grants? Just a question.
And this was the one thing that we wanted to look at, is whether they can do that. I'd have to talk with Detective Nash on that, on what she wants to retain and what not. The other key part is that our grants writer doesn't know that I'm offering him up at council. But yes, that's what he does, and we certainly want to explore that in all of our grants, because we do have officers who are doing their own grants.
Chris, I know you've investigated that. Would you want to comment?
Yeah, Ted actually does know about the conversation, because just last week we were in a meeting together between the department and finance and Ted's capacity. We're certainly seeing, as we had hoped and anticipated, and this council and prior council initiated, that there are grant dollars out there. So understanding his capacity, where the capacity of increasing it, whether it be central with another grant writer, once we cap out at what that capacity is. And there will always be a part, generally speaking, there'll always be a part of grants that is not centralized, because there requires an expertise in, say, law enforcement or public works kind of stuff. So we're working through those, trying to hit those sweet spots, making sure we're maximizing the resources on both sides. So that conversation between Katie, specifically to domestic violence, and our grant writer is just exactly what could be given up, or frankly, where's the max capacity there? And additional grants may bring more dollars to us, but will need to be administered by additional people. So we're looking at all that, not only in safety, but also in public works. Those are really the two primary areas for us to keep bringing more federal dollars into the city to augment our local dollars.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I was a little surprised at your answer for Councilmember Boyette about your choice between six for one or the other, as far as the domestic violence unit or putting them on the street, which I think we need them there too. But, domestic violence is, the family and domestic violence is very prevalent in our city. And so it surprises me you would choose the patrol over this. So there must be a serious problem out there, even more serious than this. So can you explain why it would be patrol over this?
Well, right now, council member, we are running from call to call to call. And sometimes we're doing that without a cover officer available because everybody is busy. It is absolutely our number one priority is to answer calls for service. The patrol division is the backbone of any police department, and we need to be able to respond to the community's calls. The DVI side of thing is extremely important, and I'll go back to my opening remarks. It is significant, and you saw my earlier stats about 59% of all the assaults are domestic in nature. The DVI by design is follow-up. So you need to have first responders going to the 911 call, doing a initial investigation, gathering information, identifying people, making an arrest where appropriate. And then on the back end, if more work is needed or we can't find anybody, that's where the DVIs come in. It is purely follow-up work. But if I don't have anybody on the front end to answer a call quickly, then obviously tragedy can happen there. And it transcends more than just domestic stuff. It's all the calls that we get into. We absolutely have to be able to respond to the calls. And on the back end, I'm not saying it's not important, and it is a significant issue. But when you start saying what priority, what do we have to do for this community? Well, the community, I mean, they're recognizing the problem we have with domestic, but they also know when they pick up the phone and call 911, they expect an officer to show up. And so, again, as the city keeps growing and our numbers are finite and stagnant and down a little bit because we have retirements and attrition, then we get stretched. And so moving somebody to another specialty doesn't help that situation.
Okay, thank you. I think that helps me understand this some, but it's surprising that we're 12 down before we want to see the DVI unit go in place. And Chris, I think this is addressed to you. I've talked about this before. When we set the level of the officers several years ago through that study, it was the right number then. But I don't think we've planned on what is the right number, now. And I think we really need to look at that because we've heard the 20 before and different numbers and stuff. So I think it's really important we really find a way that we know what is the right number instead of saying, well, we think it's this number. What's the study say?
Councilmember, I think what you're seeing right now, because of the staffing and where we're at, even though we're down a few, our shifts are going to work probably on the low end, 10, 11, and I saw as many as 14. And our internal study showed that we need 16 every shift. 16 on shift to handle all the calls that we're having right now and not be saturated, not have anybody get put on hold. So I don't know what that math looks like, but to have 16 on for days, 16 and 16 for 3 shifts is what our internal analysis shows. So nobody's waiting for any calls. And half of those were 2 officer responses. The other half were single. And then there's a portion in there that our CSOs are going to. So we have some data, and it moves around all over the place. But suffice to say, we could use some more officers across the board.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Bueller. Councilmember Kennedy?
Chief, can you remind us, we have, again, an issue with our jail and or need for short-term detention. If we're able to address that, how much does that reduce the load of we have this catch and release kind of policing that we talk about, and that's adding more burden to our current police force. Presumably that stretches them, I guess. How does the calculus change if we're able to address that in terms of additional staffing needed?
Well, certainly, and the fewer officers we have, I mean, they run from call to call. A lot of the overtime we get is because they haven't had a chance to write a report. So they have to wait until the next shift comes on, or they have to hang over to do that. Terribly worried about burnout when you run into those situations. And then officer safety issues, of course. If we're if you only have one officer available, and although we try not to do it, sometimes you got to go, and you're it. And so, we try to mitigate those things as much as possible. So the more officers available, we have better response, efficient, can spend more time with the citizens rather than, I got your name and number, here's a report number, I gotta go. We can spend more time with them, on the front end, get better investigations. If we can do better stuff on the front end, it's less stuff that Katie has to do on the back end or other detectives, depending on what the case is. On the flip side of that, anytime you change something in the justice system, it's gonna affect something else. You put a bunch of cops on, it's going to affect, our city attorney, and it'll certainly affect the jail if there's nothing that changes down there across the board. Take it away, it's the same issue, so, hope that answered your question, so.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Kennedy?
Chief, if we look at the 16 per shift, you're looking at an additional 21. Plus you have 21's not enough to handle the additional 7 per day because it's 7 days a week. So would your numbers go up 25 to 30?
Well, they could, council member, I don't want to be too greedy. Cops are expensive, public safety is expensive, and the community decides what level they want. To just say, this is what we need to have the 16, I wasn't hesitate to say that, but I would fully expect that council and administration say you need to back off that a little bit. That's expensive. And again, it's ultimately what the community decides on that. So what can we, balance out with that?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Ripsis, and we'll try to wrap this one up.
Chris, I think all this last discussion, the last 10 minutes, I think it really points out the need to get that CPSM study updated. It's been 4 or 5 years now. We've made a lot of progress with the 102 items or whatever it was that we had before. I think it's time to have them back and get a good staffing model in place that we can grow with over the next 5 to 10 years, not only just in the police, but as you mentioned, how that affects the attorney's office, court, and through. So as we're doing that effort and that analysis on the jail, I think it makes sense to make sure it's on the docket for this next year in our in-house as well.
Thank you, Councilman Rupsis. I certainly agree.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Let's have public comment on this item. If anybody would like to comment on the domestic violence initiative discussion we just had, please come forward. Anybody like to comment on item number 4? No one is coming forward, so we'll close item number 4. Council, we're coming close to our traditional 7:30 time for a break. We've got one more main item of substance, the SEPTED discussion. I assume that would take us at least 20 minutes. Would you like to take a break, or would you like to not just keep moving? I see signs for keep moving. This is just a work session. If anybody needs to leave, step out, use the restroom, please feel free to do so. Then with that, we'll go ahead to item number 5, our SEPTED committee plan update. John Caterino.
Yes, good evening.
So as Kevin is pulling things up, as you get Mayor, Council, as you know, John is leading our internal cross-disciplinary team on implementation of crime prevention through environmental design. We've got some other folks in the audience that can help answer some questions in that regard, but the purpose tonight clearly was a focus on public safety in the broad sense, and we wanted to provide an update to you on where we are with at the ground level of implementation of this system specific to our properties and city assets. So,
Yeah, thanks for that introduction, Chris. I'll wait till Kevin gets our slide deck up before I get into substance of our presentation.
All right, so the last time that we presented on SEPTED was September 18th, 2023. So we wanted to take this touch point and discuss as a committee where we're at and where we're going. We've made progress and inroads on our strategy, our roadmap, and our plan, and we felt it was important to give council visibility on that. So the committee is comprised of individuals from 5 different departments and divisions in alphabetical order. We've got facilities, parks, planning, police, and public works. The information that's going to be presented this evening is the culmination of months of scrubbing data and having conversations to determine foundationally which is the larger of the core SEPTED principles that's going to net us the best return. So Nick with Parks and Nate with Police have been doing a lot of the tactical work, and I'd like to give them the opportunity to spotlight their efforts and how they fit into the larger SEPTED initiatives that we plan to achieve. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nick.
Nick, all yours. Would you introduce yourself also?
My name is Nick Miller. I work for the Parks Department, and I'm on the SEPTED committee. So let's look at what we call the Big Six. So that's our parks here. We decided to focus our parks here in the city because within the city itself, that's where we're having the most problems, crime-wise. We're not seeing that like City Hall or parking garages, anything like that. We're seeing the crime in the parks. And I'm going to talk about activation in these areas. What do I mean by activation? I mean how many people are in the parks, events, that kind of stuff. So top of the list is North Park. It's a park that isn't activated as much as it could be, but it still has kind of a lot going on as far as like the Ys there. We've got kickball there, Little League, all that kind of stuff, as well as like a pretty nice playground. Second on the list is South Park. Also a very well activated space. You've got the farmer's market, a lot of events, a lot of cookouts, the splash pad, the pool brings all those things into the park. So it's a very well activated space. Third on the list is Dealer. It's our baseball field. Can't get any more activated than that in the summer. But when baseball isn't going on, it's locked down, right? Fourth on the list, Pioneer. Super activated. I don't think you can find a more activated park in the city currently. It's one of my favorites. Stewart Park, baseball, Little League, softball, super activated when that's going on. When it's not, there's not a lot going on there, and that's okay. And then Skate Park, also a very, very activated area. If it's warm enough, the kids are out there skating, the adults are out there skating. So those are our Big Six. That's what we're kind of focusing on as the committee over the next 5 years. So here's the low to moderate income data for those areas. Most of them fall into that except for Stewart and Pioneer. The rest of them fall into those low to moderate income areas. All right, so here's the incidents from 2018 to 2022. So there's a breakdown of them over the years. So we've got north, south, definitely our 2 most crime-ridden areas. So what does that look like when we throw it into a graph? Thank you. So what I'd like to kind of point out is this one right here. That's Dealer Park. So in 2020, we started making SEPTED style improvements to the outside of Dealer Park. And over the years, we've made incremental improvements based on the needs and like what we've seen on the outside of Dealer. So crime definitely has dropped at Dealer Park since 2020. Things that we're looking at as a committee is the uptick in crime at Skate Park and at Stewart Park. And we'll kind of touch on that in a little bit. So let's talk about the process that the committee implements. So first is location. How do we choose locations? Data driven, right? So that's why we picked the top 6. So we've gone out to these locations. We've done SEPTED assessments. We've done light analysis. And then we work through our assessment, and then we come up with a plan of action to implement in those areas. And so once we implement, and then we educate. So Nate West and Nana are working on educational strategies for these areas. So let's take North Park, for example, right? We're going to talk to the task force. We're going to talk to the community. We're going to talk to businesses. We're working with partners. We're working closely with eBird, and we're making sure that we involve the Parks Department in kind of everything we do so everybody's on the same page with things. So this photo right here is taken at North Park. We went out to all the top 6. We went out at night during park operating hours and took photos. And so what did we discover? It's kind of hard to see, but there's 2 people standing in that photo. Not the safest. It's lighting, right? That's what's missing from our parks. We have a lot of activation. We have a lot of things going on. What we don't have is lighting. So why is lighting important in our parks, or in the CEPTED model? One is the illumination of human activity, positive and negative. On top of that, we all know in the fall that it gets dark around 5:30. Sunrise is until 7. Our parks are open from 6 to 10 o'clock. That's 6 hours of missed park activation time. On top of that, that's missed natural surveillance from people being in our parks, but that's also missed natural surveillance from people around the parks, the community, our police, anybody driving by. They can't see in our parks to see who's in there potentially after hours. So why did we choose North Park, right? It's top of the list, but also public perception. I've had a lot of conversations recently about North Park, and pretty much everybody always says the same thing. I don't feel safe there. So that's one of the things that we're really trying to focus on, is making sure that people feel safe when they come into North Park. It's kind of the same thing at South Park too. You talk to people, they're like, I don't feel safe in South. So we're really going to strive to change that over the next few years. So North Park, what's happening? Massive improvements coming for 2024. Brand new bathroom, brand new playground equipment, dog park, disc golf. We're going to put in 21 dark sky compliant solar lights. I'm really excited about that. But then also we've got some really cool events coming there. Ren Fair's there. We're going to do Shakespeare in the Park is going to be there now. A fairy and gnome garden competition is coming in North Park. I'm personally excited about that one. So in total, like, North Park is going to be a brand new park, and that's really exciting. What like North Park looks like now, it's not going to look like that when we're done making improvements. Another thing I'm really, really excited about is we're going to bring those walls down on that community center. They're coming down. Why is that really cool and really exciting? Because a bunch of city departments are going to come together and we're going to work on that project. A demolition company is going to bring them down. Parks Department, streets, code enforcement, we're all going to kind of work together to remove that. And then eBird's going to come in with the help of the Parks Department, code enforcement, and we're going to reactivate that space in the background. There's going to be a brand new mural. We're talking about some cornhole. We're talking about some ping pong tables, and we're talking about some chess tables and some new landscaping back there. And that's why that's kind of the whole CEPTED thing, right? We're making these improvements. We're focusing on public safety, but on top of that, we're also involving the community. The mural is going to be done by a local community artist, which is going to be pretty cool. So where do we go from here, right? We've got some future plans. South Park, we're already looking at how we can implement lighting improvements at South Park. Skate Park, we're going to work closely with the Billings Skate Park Committee and the Parks Department to make improvements there. It's going to be pretty neat. Dealer Park's improvements are small enough that we can kind of do those without having to use the 120 from CEPTED over the next few years. So that's going to move our timeline up a year. Stewart Park, this is a park that needs target hardening. What do I mean by target hardening? We're looking at security cameras, lights, gates. It's already a super activated space, but the stuff that happens there, we just need to like target harden that space a little bit better. And then Pioneer Park, again, already super activated. So what are we looking at? Lights, strictly just lights there. Thank you. You have any questions?
Thank you, Nick. I'll start you off with one. Less people think we're going to tear down the North Park Community Center and all of its walls. I think you're just talking about those protrusions that come out on the west end of the building. I don't know what they were intended for, racquetball at one point.
Yeah.
Now you kind of store some bark or something. That's what we're talking about, right? Is those things, not all of the walls of the North Park.
I should have specified. I call them the walls because they're just massive. They're for handball. No one plays handball anymore that I've ever seen in there. Sorry if I offended any handball players. But no, we're going to tear those down and reactivate that space. Just those 3 walls in the back.
Okay, great. Thank you. Other questions for Nick? Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This isn't a question, but I would just like to say that there are now people walking their dogs at Comanche Park, and that would not have happened years ago. So, I mean, improvements in these parks, the funding for that came through the Community Development Board, but you can have a park that looks scary, make improvements, and have people walking their dogs there and really activating that space. And that is a low-income park that has really, council, of course, approved those appropriations for improvements, and Comanche Park is different now. And so this can happen, even though we do have a lot of parks to work on. I'm really glad for your work, and thank you.
Thank you. And then to kind of play off that point, we're looking too at other funding sources as well to help, like CBDG funds, Sabura, like those kind of areas where we can bring more funding in.
Thank you. Other questions for Nick? Councilmember Shaw.
I have one. I hope it's just an easy softball. Just so I have an idea for budgeting in my mind, you said 21 solar lights are going to go in at North Park. About how much do those cost?
So that's the reason why we are going with solar. Roughly, it's around 80,000, installs 20, and then bringing down the walls is 20. So that fits us really, really close to our $120,000 budget we got for the SEPTED money.
80,000 for all of them or per light?
Oh, just for all of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Tidswell.
At North, most of the improvements are happening. We've got I believe John can maybe answer this. We should have put the order in for the lights or the bid in for the lights. I know that we can get the heads really soon. Poles are going to be a few months out, but we can't do really a lot of the drilling in winter anyway. And then the walls coming down will probably be like a spring thing. So hopefully everything will get done in 2024.
Thank you. Councilmember Kennedy?
Lighting seems to be a factor in a lot of these parks. I know I was out at the park in the Heights, Castle Rock Park. They need lights out there, and I know the skate park needs some lights. Do you have an ongoing plan to go forward and try to light up most of these parks? Because it seems like most of the problem that we have in the parks is at night.
Yeah, so working with the skate park committee, we just had a meeting and they're going to start to put lights in and cameras, which will help that park out quite a bit. Again, one with activation, this way the kids can skate in the fall when it's dark. As far as lighting up other parks, we're going to focus, just the SEPTED committee ourselves, I can't speak for the Parks Department, but we're going to focus on those top 6 parks and getting those lit up. And then once that's done, we can probably work from there going down the list. That's just for the SEPTED committee though.
And just off the lighting for a minute on skate park, because I drive by that every day, are you looking at any type of fencing and lights around the skate park?
So our plan for SEPTED included a fencing implementation plan, as well as a current lighting plan that encompasses the whole park and allows for future expansion into that green space.
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
So Mayor and Council, the piece I would just add, consistent with Nick, is, yeah, we're close to 6 figures. Some of the parks over 6 figures to light them. The quality of these guys' work is great. Canopy, tree canopy, and access to sunlight makes a difference on cost. So the Crime Prevention Fund this year has $120,000 for SEPTED implementation. We also are utilizing CDBG funds for those parks that are within the LMI, low to moderate income areas. However, there's also an additional caveat that the feds pay very close attention to. We cannot use CDBG funds if an investment area is within a blast zone of our refineries. So just because it's in LMI is above 50 doesn't necessarily mean we can use those funds, but we're working to maximize the utilization of CDBG and our local funding. Phase in really just depends on how much cash that we have relative or fundraising effort to implement. So that's why you're seeing a multi-year plan. These guys would say, oh, let's get all these lights in here this next construction season or 2. Money is the impediment to doing that faster. So that'll be ultimately up to us in budgeting and how we do that.
So, Chris, that was a question I was going to ask, and feel free you or Nick to comment on this, but we obviously are looking for every nickel and dime we can for a short-term holding facility at the Ellison County Detention Facility. This was $120,000 in this year's budget for SEPTED. What is staff's likely request for future years in the SEPTED world? Or is that known? And I don't know if either of you or Mike Pigg is back there being very quiet too. He might have an opinion. But.
So let me first make sure Nick knows. We get to work together a little bit through this committee. Nick, whatever you guys have seen from budgetary, share that. I wouldn't keep the council from understanding what kind of numbers we're talking about. I don't think we know, what our budget requests will be in the upcoming year. I don't have that number, but these guys could tell you the kind of range we're talking about just for lighting maybe across those 5 parks or some of what they're looking at.
So we gave a quote for Dealer Park, for example, that was 13, right? That's very doable.
And we say 13 lights.
No, $13,000.
Oh, 13,000.
13,000. What isn't doable currently with the amount of money we're getting for SEPTED is like Pioneer, for example. We can't use solar there because of the trees, and just to light up the trail and the sidewalks is over $250,000. So we're looking at a similar situation at South. Just went over there, did a light survey at South. We could use solar in some areas, which obviously saves us a whole bunch of money, but most of that park too, where the trees fall and where the shade falls, solar isn't gonna work. So we're kind of going back to the drawing board there on how can we light South Park up in an effective way, in a safe way, within the confines of that $120,000. And like, that's gonna eat up all of that next year, just to put some lights up at South Park. If that gives you an idea too. Skate park, for example, because again, with the skaters and that kind of stuff, solar's not really gonna be the best option there. So powered lights are, and it's like 160 to 180,000 for skate park.
So what I'm hearing is that staff would like at least the 120 that you had this year to continue for an indefinite number of years.
Please.
I think that's safe. The bottom line is, and you guys all know this from every one of these discussions tonight, these are complex issues. To be clear, we know that the issue of incarceration has been one that the police department has been communicating with administration about since the first conversation about the first repeal and replace public safety levy 5 years ago. That being said, in my opinion, we want to tackle this thing holistically. And so ultimately, that'll be the finesse. How much goes into prevention? How much goes to the other end? Those will be tough but thoughtful staff recommendations to you, and ultimately you'll make those critical decisions about what is the right balance in those investments. But there's no shortage of need relative to focusing on improving safety in our community in both the short term and the long term.
Okay, thank you. If any individuals or businesses are listening, we will put your name on one of those lights on a little brass plaque. Councilmember Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. Nick, you mentioned that the 6 were selected because they were the highest incidences of crime, correct? So will you be evaluating that each year of all the different parks to see if there's any other parks that have gotten a little more higher in crime, and then kind of put that one in and drop the lowest one out again? Is that kind of how you plan to work on this? Or are you going to, once these 6 are in there, you're going to stick with them till they're done?
Yeah, like I wouldn't say anything set in stone. If like this, we have a plan currently, and like the Billings Skate Park Committee is going to take care of skate, which was the lowest on the list, right? In Dealer Park. So that realistically, now we're looking at like a 3 to 4 year plan. But we're also going to start to look at the data too. We've made all these improvements to North. So what does that look like now? Okay, we've done all the lighting, the education, the space activation. So what does that look like at North now? Is crime dropping? The research says yes, that it'll drop. But we won't know until we've done all those kind of implementations and improvements and see where the data falls after that. But like looking at the numbers earlier from Dealer, we started in 2020, we made improvements and crimes dropped there.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to seeing some of that data, see how it works, because some of that, the stats there, I mean, they were spiking, and who knows why. You went from 100 down to 80 or something like that. So the other thing I take from this is these were the 6 highest or least safest parks in our city, is what I'm assuming. So that means that if they're not on the list, you're safer than some of the other parks. Did you rank all the parks at all?
Yeah, there's a longer list of crime in our parks.
Would you mind sharing what that longer list of where they ranked in, with the council?
As far as the top 6 or
No,
the
more
rest
than,
of the parks?
yeah, you looked at all the parks to see what the incidences were, right? Do you have that longer list you could share with us?
Yeah, I could get that to you
I
guys.
see John saying yes.
Yeah.
That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for Nick before we go to public comment? Okay, Nick, appreciate it very much. Very educational. Everybody here has heard this presentation on the SUPTED principles. If anybody'd like to comment, please come forward to the podium. We just ask that you tell us your name and address and keep your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Hi there, my name's Peter O'Brien.
For our condolences.
Thank you. Lifelong fan though, so I'm not going to quit yet. Yeah, I'm a property owner downtown 313 North Broadway. I'm also a member of the Billings Skate Park Committee. I'm here tonight just to support the SUPTED findings that lighting especially is a really, really big need. Councilman Kennedy, like you said, if you've driven past that park or you spent any time down there, it's scary. It's a scary place. And being the only skate park that we have in town for kids, yeah, I think that we can do better there. So we as a committee are hoping to raise money to put lights in sooner. We'd like to ask though, if there are SUPTED funds, down the line, that we can allocate those towards a fence or towards the next piece of a project for safety there. So.
Yeah, some questions, Councilmember Boyette?
Do you have an estimate of what it would take to light up the skate park as a whole package?
We don't yet. I think through Parks and Rec or through the SUPTED committee, they had gotten one proposal. We're going to reach out for a few more and see if we can find a solution that we can afford. That's the main thing right now. Yep.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, but thank you very much.
Thanks.
And thank you for your work on that. Chris, did you pay him to wear that shirt?
No, I didn't, but I wanted to say, what did you pay for your address? 313 is the area code of Detroit, so.
Oh, geez, whoa.
I know, I've been a lifelong fan as well, and while grocery shopping this weekend, I ran into a guy who went to San Francisco to see the game. He wished he would have paid for seats, he was stand-up only, but at least he was at the game, so we're making progress.
Wow, that is a dedicated fan. Go ahead.
My name is Amanda Kelly. I'm a skater mom, and I'm also on the Billings Skate Park Committee. So I have literally spent thousands of hours at the skate park over the last 3 years with my son. So I've made many of those phone calls that you saw up on there, and if you saw in the last year, we were ranked #2 on that list of the most calls. So it is sketchy down there, and my son has had to actually protect me down there. So he has told me I'm a liability now. There was a homeless man that was hitting on me, and he wouldn't leave me alone. My husband was there, and he was even hitting on me. Well, my husband had to leave, and he told my son to take care of me. And my son had to use his skateboard to push 2 grown men away from me down at the park, and it was so scary. Now, you might be thinking that I have this little son. That's why I've been at the skate park. My son is almost 17 years old, and it is that scary down there that I don't want to leave him down there by himself. So that's why I've spent all this time down there. The homeless people know me because I'm down there so much. They sit under those trees and they're like, see you tomorrow, or, they just talk to me because I'm down there all the time. But there's needles in the park. There's crack pipes in the park. It is just, there was a homeless woman that threw a rock the size of my fist at my son's head and then flashed all the boys. Like, the nudity down there is beyond ridiculous. And so there's been burn bowls in the 3rd bowl of the skate bowl. There's so much going on. And so I'm just looking to clean this up so that my son can go down there by himself and skate at 17 years old. So.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate your being there and being the eyes of our community.
Thank you.
Don't hesitate to call the police either. Okay, any other comment on this item?
So, Mayor, if I could just comment, just some other things that are going on down there for some of you that may not know. The city does own a parking lot right next adjacent to the skate park down there. And I've got a meeting later this week scheduled with the skate park committee, Parks Department, and then a promoter down there. And as you know, we've been trying to activate that space with concerts in the summertime and things like that. So we're going to try to develop that out, meet in conjunction with the skate park committee to see, how we can partner on some things and maybe see some development in that area down there that we might bring to you at some point.
Great, thank you. Kevin, do you know what the camera situation is, or Chris?
Yeah, I was going to comment there as well. So we did test, I think, for about 30 days. There's a local vendor, entrepreneur in town who lent us their camera system, essentially identical. If you pay attention in front of Lowe's, between Lowe's and Walmart on the west end, there you'll see cameras and lights on a rented, or I think in that case, a unit that Lowe's owns. This gentleman had allowed us to borrow that system and just test and see what would its impact be on the park. We have to be conscientious. Karen keeps us in line with state law. We cannot use cameras in public spaces as a, what's the word I'm looking for?
Prophylactic monitoring.
Okay, what was that in English?
Never, ever give me a working microphone.
We'll get you.
Okay, you can't use private entities' cameras to do just type of basic monitoring or surveillance. They can be used in the event that there is a major crime event that needs to be investigated. Just like we ask individuals for their Ring cameras when there's been a crime in a neighborhood. You can't simply go and ask everybody on a block to hand you their Ring cameras for the foreseeable future to see what's going on in a neighborhood. That is not constitutionally permissible. So if there is a private company like Shields has them in their parking lot, and there is an assault in that parking lot, and police respond to that assault, but it's an after-the-fact monitoring. In the event that it is city-owned property, like the skate park, cameras can be used on city property with some exclusions. You can't monitor places like restrooms. You can't monitor audio that would pick up conversations of private individuals. You cannot make them available to the general public because the last thing you want is to be in a situation where somebody's getting a divorce and thinks that somebody was in the park with their paramour. You can use them to investigate major crime events. You can use those on city property.
Perfect. So part of our discussion is, okay, what did that 30 days show us? How much of a deterrent was that? Just the visibility of it being there, as well as, what were the effects? So we'll test some more of those out this season as well. Our timing wasn't great when it was available this winter. But ultimately, as a part of SEPTED and or just improving safety in public spaces, trying to find that right line, compliant with the law always, but being able to improve the safety of our public spaces.
And just one more thing I did want to put, because this is why they don't give me a microphone. You also do, if you put cameras on city property, you must have signage there to let people know that there are cameras in place and cameras in effect, because people's expectation of privacy must be reasonable. And if we are using cameras in public spaces, we need to provide the public notice that those cameras are in view.
Thank you. Chris, do you know how much those portable units cost if the city were to acquire one?
I don't offhand, but the business in town, I'm fairly sure that they're interested in both renting the units to us if that's the most cost-effective way, as well as building them and selling them to us. I just don't recall what the cost of it is, but I think both models are things that they're interested in, as well as there's probably others who do the same kind of work. But
Okay, thank you. Council, looks like we might have somebody who wanted to add to this conversation. With your permission, we'll go back to it. You got something else for us about the cameras?
Thank you. I just had a quick question on the cameras. I know on a lot of California beaches, Florida beaches, which are state or city owned, they have cameras that are on a live feed so that anybody could see it. Is that different for the state of Montana? Because one of our goals as a committee was we would like to see those cameras. We would love to see the signage because I think that's a deterrent to a lot of the wrongdoing that goes on down there. Also, as a parent, and Amanda as well, if my kids were going to go down there, I'd love to be able to log on and say, oh, they're actually there.
So Karen, any problems with a webcam?
I do think that is problematic with the privacy protections under the Montana Constitution, which actually provide more protection than the United States Constitution.
So it is state-specific?
State-specific.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. We'll close the public comment period on that item. That concludes item number 5. Chris, highlights of upcoming items.
yeah, so a couple things to be conscientious of. So your primary thing next week, there's a number of SIDs, but most notably, the last item is a conversation about Wilson Park, about the Yellowstone Valley Animal Shelter and the Rocky Vista University proposal. And just to be clear, Monday is not an absolute approval, but I think is a critical step to understanding if the council would like me and our staff to move forward with this idea that we've been asked, which is to gift a portion of Wilson Park to Yellowstone Valley Animal Shelter for what they're fundraising, a several $million project to build a new shelter in our community. So that's on your agenda next week. Looking out further, some hot topics or highlights, of course, is the March 15 and 16 retreat. Some of you have asked, would we be better to do full day on Friday, 8 a.m. through dinner, or what we typically do is we start in early afternoon or immediately after lunch on Friday and then come back Saturday and run to lunch. So I'd like some feedback there from you. Also, be thinking about conversations we'll have in the future. What would you like that focus to be for the retreat? And do we or don't we want a facilitator for that conversation? And I'm kind of waffling myself both ways. Really depends on what we want to accomplish relative to our most recently adopted set of priorities and advancement there. I do have a location though. We are going to meet at the Operations Center up at the airport. They've got a nice space up there. It is tough to find in this town, genuinely, a place where you can meet with 25 people, on a Friday and a Saturday kind of thing. So we are going to use the Ops Center. We've really liked where we've been the last few years, but we've had sound challenges, I think, as much as anything, being able to hear in the depot, and last year, some issues there. So feedback there is appreciated. You'll also have coming in late February, the sale of City Hall. So you'll know it's been well over 18 months that we've been in this process there. And there's some different approaches in the conversations amongst you and staff as well. We've got two things that are connected, but they are, I want to be very clear, they're independent policy decisions that need to be made. One is on the sale or no sale to the offer that you have. And the second is for that offer, their project is requiring tax increment financing funds as a part of that project being financially feasible. So kind kind of hard to untangle those things for a lot of people, but the truth is they are independent decisions. You absolutely will have a policy call to make, and you could say yes to one and no to the other. The owner will have to decide what to do with that. But whether those should be on the same agenda evening, some advocate, frankly, that they like them on the same evening, and some advocate, frankly, I'd like to have them on separate evenings. So your feedback there is appreciated, but definitely February 26th, we plan on at least bringing you one of those two. We thought the sale, and whether we add to that same night the TIF application or wait on the TIF application 2 weeks. I want to, let's see here, want to make a plug, well, actually two things, and it fits some of the comments here tonight. So we're coming into budget season. Staff is developing budgets. Something we're going to try this year, we're going to do differently this year, is I have asked the directors to present to the staff in a phased approach what they have and their staff believes are the needs of their departments, and then show us a phasing of how to implement that. So as an example, when the chief says, you know, I believe as your chief of police, and I'll just draw a number, we need 20 more officers. Well, we cannot afford 20 more officers in our budget in 1 year without making, you know, substantial other cuts. But instead of the approach that says, well, we know we're only going to get 2% in revenue next year, so don't bother asking for anything that's going to exceed that 2% number, I believe that the administration, the council, and the public needs to start better seeing and understanding what are the needs of these departments, and then what is your phased-in approach to getting to that point. And it really is easier said than done, especially on the internal services side of the equation, because I'll just use an example, if IT says, or fleet says, oh yeah, we're off by X number, their fees to everybody else in the organization automatically go up to cover that, and that has a significant ripple effect on the budget. But again, my point is just to make you aware, we're approaching that differently. I want you and the public to see what did that department and what did those subject matter experts ask for in their budget. You'll see a balancing of that through administration and finance, and then ultimately you'll make the policy call as to where funds will be allocated. And then last but not least, I got to plug what the fire department told you tonight, in addition to crisis response and in addition to the MRTs. My homeowner's insurance has gone up substantially. I've talked to a few of you. You've said yours has too. Everybody in this town should call their insurance person and find out if lowering our ISO rating from a 3 to a 2, that is a significant accomplishment. One is the best. One is New York City. You know, that I believe in the past that 2 should make a difference. And if that saves a homeowner $50 a month or $20 a month or $200 a year, remember, we're always talking about what is a tax increase that might be those kind of numbers annually. So I would encourage you, please get on the phone, talk to your broker, ask, because that's real. That change and that allocation. And in some context, if you're outside of our Billings urban fire service area, you're a 10. 10 not being good, 10 being we don't know that a truck will get to you. So anyways, just want to emphasize the accomplishment of the fire department and how that could affect every business in this town and hopefully all of our homeowners as well on literally what they pay for insurance. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Councilmember Rowan has a question. Councilmember Rowan, or comment?
I do, thank you, Mayor. Chris, I want to go back to this idea of what you're talking about for the budget, which I actually think could be a tremendously helpful tool to have. And I'm wondering what it might look like. Do you envision this looking sort of like a 5 or 10 year, almost like planning document type thing? I mean, are you asking your staff to scale over a time period, or, what, can you just say a little more about that?
Sure. So what Andy and I put out was that in their narrative, the department heads, that in their budget narrative, they would explain the big picture. Here's what we ultimately think we need, and our recommendation to you based on the urgency of the issue and revenue and things of that nature is we have a 5-year plan to implement, and you're seeing the ask of year 1 in our proposed budget. And so I think this first year, it'll be interesting. I don't know how far, how much we may see 5s or 7s or 10s as far as implementation periods. But I'm asking them to absolutely put that in their narrative so we can see it and read it, and then from there understand what might we accomplish in this first year, and how could that maybe help us, as you're saying, as an ultimately a planning document going forward.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else for Chris before we adjourn? Councilmember Gillick?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We also have the initiative, Councilmember Rupsis, it looks like he's updated the initiative to have policy questions. You have 4 different sections that you divided it into, with some policy questions as well as policy ideas. Anything beyond reading this document that we think needs to be done in advance of that? I guess I want to make sure we don't have the same thing happen as last time, I guess, in terms, I want people to feel like what we're talking about doing with the initiative, Councilmember Rupsis, correct me if I'm wrong, is just to put time for us to be able to discuss this, not to actually implement those things. But I just want to make sure everyone's feels like they have the information they need to be able to make a decision whether or not to vote for that initiative next time. I don't know. Anything you want to say on this, Mayor? I'm sorry, you're the one.
No,
who
absolutely,
determines that.
Councilmember Rupsis.
Certainly, and thank you for bringing that up. Yes, the document was updated based on our conversation a couple weeks ago. So like Councilmember Gulick said, I broke things out into some different kind of topic areas, suggested some questions that might be, discussion type questions for us. And then, broke those 10 ideas that I had listed in the original initiative out, just as examples of the types of policy ideas that, I may propose during those conversations. Other people may propose others, but not that anybody be asked to vote for all 10 as a block or anything like that. So as, remember, this initiative is just to set up some work session time to start talking through some of these things, these policy discussions. Some of them are very timely. We just received notice that the subdivision regulations are being updated, and public meetings are happening, I think, starting next week. If not this week, I can't remember the exact timing, but, and then some of those are specifically, I've taken a look through them, and they're already kind of talked about, and in my opinion, maybe not favorably, but, these are definitely timely issues for us to discuss before we get too far down the line of whether it's the subdivisions or the land use planning or growth plan, anything like that. So again, we're just trying to set up some work session time to start having some of these policy conversations proactively. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you. I don't want this to seem very random, and Director Pig has already left the room, but we still have someone from the Parks Department. I just read research lately that children who grow up close to a park have higher bone density than children who don't grow up close to a park. And if the park has a tree canopy, they have even denser bones than children who grow up to a park, near a park that doesn't have a tree canopy. And I just want to add that. It sounds a little random, but kids' bones are important. Thank you.
We are in favor of kids' bones, for sure. On that note, We do have an opportunity for, there's no public comment, I'm assuming on item 6. No one's here to comment, so we'll move to council discussion. Anything, general council discussion before we go to public comment on non-agenda items? Councilor Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, that letter came in tonight that I got a chance to read from the police union. And one of the things I was interested in is that they said that their departments are, I think it was departments or organizations are starting to try to figure out how they're going to use this $2.6 million of excess funds. Can you kind of explain that these aren't excess funds? These are, we allocate a budget. I mean, they're just, we don't have extra funds. If you ask their finance officer, how much do we have in reserve? It'll be zero. So there's not excess funds there. Can you kind of explain why suddenly we have people, maybe, first of all, the fund, the fact that they're not excess funds, and then how did this get out? And why are people starting to try and fight over money we don't have?
Mayor and Councilmember Neese, first I would say, right, everything we do, we try to make sure we do it as transparent as possible. It's all public money, it's the public budget, et cetera. Specific to the $2.6 million, we know that in the current fiscal year budget, with the substantial increase in property values and the evaluation from the state of Montana, combined with, I always call it the franchise fee lawsuit, but there's a more technical name to it. The franchise fee lawsuit settlement had us making a one-time payment of roughly $2.6 million. We were able to do that underneath of the cap of our mill levy. Billings typically, and what I mean by typically is almost all years, is at its mill levy cap from the city charter. We may be within 1 or 2 mills, but we don't have a lot of room there. And what we know is that one-time payment was made. We could lower property taxes next year by that amount, or some portion of that amount may be used for investments or costs related to your overall budget. So that's what I think, well, I know people are referring to relative to is that where could that $2.6 million in cap be spent? And it could be spent anywhere in the general fund as this body sees fit based on how you set the mill levy for the next year.
Thank you. So it's not so much excess funds as it's the room in the cap up to our mills. And so the council can choose to just keep it at the current level. They have done that many years in the city. We haven't actually hit that cap a lot. I don't know what the exact number is, but for a number of years, we've been below the cap and that. So I think it's important that we keep that understanding that, as the budget time comes forward, yeah, I think these ideas that have been discussed tonight are important to take a look at, but it's not excess funds. It's funds that we have to actually tax people for to get those funds to pay for what's needed. But thank you.
Every dollar of it is tax dollars without a question. And Andy, if he were here tonight, would be talking to us and reminding you where we are relative to cash flow. And just the last reminder, and we'll let the mayor hit the gavel here if he's ready to. We are in the middle of, or actually not the middle, we're in the tail end of a City Hall / Law and Justice Center project that is going to serve this community for many decades to come. And so one of the most significant capital investments in the general fund is happening right now. So that is significant. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Thank you for those points. Anything else, council discussion? No public comment on non-agenda items. There's no members of the public who are coming forward to comment. City staff doesn't want to. So thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.